By the end of June 1937, the Nationalists had captured the Basque region in northern Spain, including the major industrial center of Bilbao. Cut off from other Republican areas, the Bilbao Republicans fully abandoned the city in the face of a superior air force on June 10th. Meanwhile, the staunchly Republican city of Barcelona was beginning to tear itself apart. Barcelona was the site of the most left-wing policies of the Republicans. Taxis and buses were painted anarchist red and black, and middle to upper-class people began disguising themselves in shabby clothes to hide from angry mobs. Women in Barcelona gained many rights. However, prostitutes were still looked down upon and treated as lesser because they were part of a capitalist system. Waiters refused tips, and beggars were given anything they needed. Everyone called each other comrade, and businesses were taken over by the workers. The anarchists and their main allies, the Marxist Workers' Party, or POUM, wanted a social revolution to smash capitalism, while the communists supported by the Soviets simply wanted to win the war and keep the Republican government in place. The Soviet advisors accused the POUM of being a Trotskyite or a fascist group. The advisors also helped institute a Stalinist Soviet atmosphere in Barcelona. The police were strict, free speech was curtailed, and people became angry that some had access to cigarettes while others had to smoke licorice root. On May 3rd of 1937, shooting broke out after Republican guards tried to take over telephone exchanges from the anarchists who had been tapping Soviet calls. Peace wasn't restored until May 8th, when 4,000 armed men from Valencia arrived to stop the fighting. After the fighting, the communists claimed it had started because of a Trotskyist conspiracy and ousted Largo Caballero. He was replaced by Juan Negrin as premier. The POUM was outlawed. George Orwell had returned to Barcelona at this time after fighting and being shot in the neck. He fled Barcelona at the time and would write about these experiences in Homage to Catalonia. Orwell hated the Stalinists, but later admitted he exaggerated the POUM as a positive force. The Republican police there had adopted the methods of the NKVD of Russia and cracked down on opposition in Barcelona, leading to disillusionment among some, especially the international brigades, who spoke less and less of this being a crusade against fascism. In April of 1937, Franco declared that the Phalangist and the Carlist and others should unify under his leadership. Some went unwillingly into what would be called the FET de las JONS, nicknamed the Movement. It looks kind of like Fête de las Johns. They adopted the red beret of the Carlist, the blue shirts and fascist salute of the Phalange, religious imagery of Catholicism, and called it all Francoism. On June 3rd of 1937, a plane crash had killed General Mola, leaving Franco the sole general to remain from the coup, and thus the main leader. Senyorho, if you remember, had also died in a plane crash, and Goded was shot. Franco declared himself caudillo, which means leader, similar to Duce or Führer. In March of 1938, Barcelona was bombarded by Italian aircraft. In April of 1938, Franco launched a march to the sea, cutting Spain in half and isolating Catalonia from Madrid and Valencia. Republican Spain was cut in two, and Franco demanded unconditional surrender. Negrin looked for aid abroad, but found that no one was willing to support them. Most were too wrapped up in what's going on with Hitler. The last major operation of the war was the Ebro Offensive, lasting from July to November 1938. 80,000 Republicans crossed the river Ebro in Catalonia, including all of the international brigades, in a final effort to push back the nationalist forces. This was a last-ditch effort. Republicans reached the city of Gandesa eventually, but the battle became a stalemate. The nationalists responded with a bombardment unheard of since World War I. Republican troops reportedly hung twigs and bags of camphor, an herb, around their necks to bite down on and cover the stench of death during the attack. In September of 1938, Negrin announced the removal of international brigades in hopes that this would lead Franco to do the same and gain some international support for a peaceful resolution. However, this happened to coincide, coincidentally, with the Munich crisis, and thus this was lost in the news cycle. Each side lost around 60,000 fighting in this battle of attrition. The Nationalists advanced after victory on towards Barcelona. January 26th of 1939, the Nationalists finally captured Barcelona. Thousands fled for France. Early in 1939, the last two remaining Republican holdouts were Madrid and Valencia. February 27th, France and Britain officially recognized Franco as the rightful government of Spain. During the same month, Franco announced that anyone who had supported the Republican government would be subject to trial and charges of treason. On March 27th, the Nationalists finally took Madrid. By April of 1939, the war had decisively ended with a victory for Franco and the Nationalists after the last Republican armies surrendered. Pope Pius XII sent a jubilant message to Franco congratulating him on his victory for Catholicism. It would only be a few months later, in September of 1939, that Hitler would invade Poland and World War II would begin, and thus the Spanish Civil War became to be seen as sort of a prologue to the whole war. So, why did the Nationalists ultimately win? Well, there's a few reasons I'm going to mention here, but there might be some more later we'll look at in class. So one main reason was the generals had more experience and tactics and strategies under their belt, and thus were just better able to command troops on the battlefield and work out strategies that were more successful than the Republican side of things. Another factor was the aid from Germany and Italy, especially the Condor Legion. Having that superior air force from Germany really helped them out. Having all the Italian troops helped out, much more so than on the Republican side, where the only real extra troops they had were from the international brigades that ultimately didn't have the kind of abilities or experience that the Italian and German troops had that were involved in the Air Force, and thus didn't really do as much. And also, just generally, the lack of international support for the Republican side and the embargoes placed on them by the Non-Intervention Committee and others really made it hard for them to be able to do much in this war to stop the other side. And the other side simply ignored what was happening, and the international community ignored the fact that they were ignoring the rules. The third and last reason was the division amongst the Republicans really hurt their war effort. For one, it meant that Stalin's aid that he was sending, one of the few countries to actually send Republicans aid, really only went to a small faction of the Republican side, those that agreed with Stalin. And also that fighting, like the fighting in Barcelona and what's called the May Days of Barcelona, May of 1937 there, really hindered the Republicans' ability to fight when they were fighting each other. So for all those reasons, it led to the Spanish Civil War becoming a victory in 1939 for the nationalist side. Hey, that's next time. All right, the end.